When you can put an aircraft in the air using our 5G network and get imagery back to a photogrammetry software that can process that imagery as it's coming in. So rather than having to wait 12 to 14 hours potentially for a map to be completed, it's done when the aircraft lands, I think is huge. And
you're listening to the Drone Radio Show podcast, the show about drones and the people who use them for business, fun, and research. Hosted by Randy Goers.
Hello, everyone. This is Randy Goers, and welcome to the Drone Radio Show podcast, episode 423. Can drones help us better prepare for major disasters? For that question, we head to Atlanta, Georgia, to speak with Chris Sanders, Senior Manager for Verizon Frontline Crisis Response Team. The Crisis Response Team at Verizon Frontline is a national, rapid deploy, professionally trained team who solve routine and complex communication challenges in all environments. This multi-disciplinary team provides on-demand emergency assistance to government agencies, first responders, frontline workers, and communities to help maintain mission-critical communications. Chris is Verizon Frontline Senior Manager for the Crisis Response Team for Georgia and Alabama, as well as the developer and leader of the Crisis Response UAS team. He draws upon his experience from 10 years on active duty in the United States Army, where he served as a tactical air traffic control operator and senior noncommissioned officer during times of crisis. His experience also includes several years of work in the UAS industry, working on mapping, photogrammetry, LiDAR, and beyond visual line of sight operations. He holds a bachelor's degree in unmanned systems and robotics from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University and a master's degree in Geographical Information Systems and cartography from the University of Southern California. Earlier this year, NOAA and Verizon Frontline signed a 3-year cooperative research and development agreement to explore new strategies to rapidly deploy uncrewed aircraft systems to collect and distribute imagery of damage resulting from severe storms such as tornadoes or hurricanes. Under this partnership, Verizon will provide the uncrewed aircraft system platform, sensor, and personnel resources needed to rapidly respond and collect aerial imagery of storm-damaged areas of interest identified by NOAA. The goal is to enhance the ability of NOAA's National Weather Service to quickly conduct post-storm damage assessments, while also providing data for research conducted by the NOAA National Severe Storms Laboratory. This data will be used to help researchers better understand tornado behavior and the impacts with the goal of improving warnings. In this episode of the Drone Radio Show, Chris talks about the Verizon Frontline Crisis Response Team, the partnership with NOAA, and how systematic data collection can aid local communities in redeveloping after a disaster. But before we hear from Chris, I want to stress that your support is the heartbeat of my podcast. Every episode is crafted with you in mind, and your generous donations ensure I can keep delivering the content you love. Whether it's the price of a coffee or a more substantial contribution, every bit helps to defray the cost of production. Donate today and be a vital part of the podcast's continued journey to greatness. And for a limited time, donate $100 or more and receive an official Drone Radio Show coffee mug. To donate, go to droneradioshow.com/donate. And if you can, please subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform and leave a nice review and rating on iTunes. It really helps improve the podcast ranking among the many thousands of active podcasts today. And by the way, if you have a great story about the use of drones that you'd like to share in a podcast, contact me at randy@droneradioshow.com. So let's learn how drones are being used to support efforts to mitigate against major disasters, with Chris Sanders of the Verizon Frontline Crisis Response Team. Let's pick up the interview where I asked Chris to introduce himself.
Hi, my name is Chris Sanders, and I am a Senior Manager for Crisis Response for our Verizon Frontline Crisis Response Team.
Chris, can you start by telling us about the Crisis Response Team at Verizon? What exactly does it do?
The Verizon Frontline Crisis Response Team is essentially a set of problem solvers. Our crisis response team supports public safety and first responders and all of our public safety partners day in and day out by providing communication solutions, consulting, UAS, really anything that from any problem standpoint that one of our public safety partners might be experiencing, and helps them solve that problem so that they can get back to doing what they need to do to either protect their community or save lives.
How does the Verizon Frontline Crisis Response Team fit into the larger Verizon organization?
The Verizon Frontline Crisis Response Team, while it is dedicated to public safety and first responders, is just a part of a larger Verizon response team. So while our team is out creating small tactical bubbles of network and solving problems for exclusively public safety and first responders, our larger Verizon response team is getting the main network back up. If it's down or whatever happens to be going on after a hurricane, after a crisis, whatever it is, that's what their goal is. We get public safety and first responders back online, and the larger response team gets the whole network back online.
Can you give us some background on how the crisis response team evolved?
We've actually been doing public safety and crisis response in various forms since 2001 when 9/11 happened. We had people within Verizon who, volunteered to go out and try to get communications back up after that happened. That was really the first time that something like that within Verizon happened. And then it kind of grew from there. But then in 2017, after Hurricane Michael, the devastation that was wreaked across the entire Florida Panhandle just was a level of devastation that had not been seen in a long time. And it was after that hurricane that Verizon realized that we needed to make a stand and we needed to make a commitment to public safety to ensure that we were going to have the personnel, the resources, and the knowledge, skills, and abilities within that team to be dedicated to getting communications back up for public safety. So since 2017, we've had a dedicated crisis response team. Then just a couple years ago, renamed it to the Verizon Frontline Crisis Response Team because, it's that representation that we are there on the front lines with our public safety partners and first responders every day.
Is the team activated only during emergencies, or is it always available for public safety purposes?
So our team is 24/7, 365 dedicated to crisis response. This is all we do. Now, when they're not doing crisis response, actual deployment type missions, then we're helping our other counterparts within public safety, whether it be from a network standpoint or a sales standpoint or anything, just out there building relationships with our public safety partners, maintaining the relationships that we already have, and also participating in exercises with those agencies during a blue sky day so that they can better understand how we can integrate with them on a dark sky day so that we can show them when they're not having to solve 1,000 problems at once during a crisis, what we can do for them and what we bring to the table.
Are there any current emergencies where the team is actively deployed?
Yes, we're actually deployed in several places. We've got people out in New Mexico dealing with wildfire stuff. There's always wildfire stuff out west. Our South team, which I'm a part of, typically we're getting into hurricane season. We've already got 2 tropical storms cooking, and we always are preparing for what comes next and how we're going to position ourselves so that we're not in the path of the storm or in the path of a wildfire, but that we can be most useful to our public safety partners and first responders.
I'd like to talk about a new initiative involving a partnership between Verizon Frontline and NOAA. Can you tell us about the partnership and what the project involves?
So we developed a cooperative research and development agreement with the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration to help them understand what kind of data from a UAS perspective they want to see after a crisis. So it was a little bit of a meeting of the minds, if you will, because about a year and a half ago, we were in Rolling Fork, Mississippi, after a series of tornadoes had struck the area, and we were deployed out there. And I was doing some mapping for an EMA so that they could see what some of the neighborhoods and the extent of the damage to some of the neighborhoods looked like. And while I was out there, I met some National Weather Service and National Severe Storms Laboratory personnel and some NOAA personnel who were out there kind of doing the same thing. And through our meeting there and through some additional conversations, what they realized was that, there are already teams out there gathering data, and that what they didn't know was what sort of data was the best, as in, it's not always about resolution. Resolution is great. And the better the resolution, the better the end product. But when you have multiple teams gathering data sets of multiple resolutions, it becomes hard to merge those together into one product, if that makes sense. So what they wanted to do was to figure out what kind of specification for gathering data they want, so that when they have other third-party companies go out and gather data, they could turn around and buy that they're buying one specific kind of data set, or, within a range, let's say, so that they can then take all those data sets and combine them into one product down the line, rather than having myriad data sets.
Is Verizon Frontline involved in collecting the data, or are you focusing on defining the requirements for the data to be collected?
Both, really. For instance, if a storm occurs, they'll call us, they'll activate us, and we will go out and we'll agree on an area that they need mapped, because it's not just us as part of this CRADA. There are also some universities that are a part of it. And we'll have some logistical meetings about who's going to fly where and who's going to gather what. And then we'll go out and perform mapping. And then through that mapping, using multiple platforms and gathering different data sets, they can then do their analysis to determine, what kind of data is the best. Because it also comes down to processing time too. The better the resolution of a data set is, the longer it takes to process typically. So, how good, quote unquote, does data need to be both useful and quick to process? Those are some of the questions that we're answering through this CRADA.
Do you envision that all the data will be collected by UAVs?
So the majority of what we're doing for the CRADA is all UAV based, because it's part of a program that I've been working on, doing rapid mapping for public safety agencies after a crisis. So we'll go in and we'll gather data as quickly as possible, because the first data that agencies get after a crisis typically is satellite data after about 24 to 36 hours. And that imagery, while it's better than nothing, is not always of the highest resolution. Satellite data is usually at a resolution of between 1 meter and 3 meters per pixel, whereas this stuff that we can get with our platforms is around 1 inch per pixel. So it's vastly superior imagery. So that is what we're focusing on for them.
One of the goals is to have everything outlined in advance. So when a disaster happens, you just launch the UAVs and follow the procedures. Is that correct?
Exactly. Our UAS program is very advanced. We have a good relationship with the FAA to get any waivers that we would need from an SGI standpoint during a crisis, whether it's beyond visual line of sight, or if we have other airframes that we're trying to use above 55 pounds or anything like that. So we have that relationship in place. We have our SOPs in place. We have the dedicated pilots. And, we are absolutely focused on getting that data to public safety agencies quickly, because that then allows the decision makers, the ones who are sending the first responders out, to focus those assets more appropriately and more effectively in the moment. So the search and rescue teams don't necessarily have to go door to door. You can focus those assets on the hardest hit areas first, and then radiate them outwards to the areas that aren't hit quite as bad. In a crisis, every second counts, right? So being able to provide imagery to those decision makers to let them make decisions that add more seconds to that clock to save people's lives is invaluable.
As a city planner, having access to such data would have been incredibly useful for relating disaster impacts to mitigation efforts within the community.
Absolutely. I think there's huge opportunities to use UAS to do things like monitoring floodplains, monitoring coastal regions, monitoring barrier islands, where you have to be aware of how much erosion is actually happening on those barrier islands because, like the Outer Banks of North Carolina, for example, those barrier islands are what keep the coastline safe to a large degree from storm surge and hurricanes and some of that water that's coming in. So using UAS and getting that data in a longitudinal fashion, because it's not something you just get once, right? Like you can't just look at a barrier island one time and project out what that's going to look like. You need to do it periodically. And getting that data gives those, to your point, the city planners and the people who are managing the city that information that they need to make better decisions.
How will the program work? When does it start? How long does it last? And what are the expectations for both Verizon and NOAA?
We signed the CRADA about a month and a half ago, and it is a 3-year research and development agreement. So for the next 3 years, we're going to help NOAA in any capacity that we can to determine what kind of data they need. And where it goes from there, I guess time will just tell, because we're building the ship as we're flying it, right? So we're working together. We're working on what activating looks like. We're working on what processing looks like, where the data goes, all of these things. In doing that, it helps solve a lot of problems, both on NOAA's side and our side, because we are a business at the end of the day, right? So being able to provide that data to public safety agencies is invaluable, and it helps us figure out how we want to position ourselves to potentially do that in the future.
What do you hope to achieve at the end of the 3-year project?
At the end of 3 years, the hope is that they will have a specification for what kind of data they want to turn around and buy from other companies. Whether it's Verizon or any other company, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, the main question is what kind of data is needed after a crisis from a specification standpoint. And if we can answer that question and we can help, NOAA with their future missions and mapping and gathering that data, then we're happy to do so.
Is AI going to be part of this project?
So for the purpose of the CRADA, no, but we do have teams within Verizon who are using AI in UAS imagery and mapping missions to identify destroyed buildings, down trees, down power lines, damaged cell towers, even as far as doing potentially future search and rescue applications, because the algorithm can be trained to find anything. So if you train it to look for people, think about this. If we had an AI algorithm that could find people in the water, how invaluable would that have been in Hawaii during the wildfire, when you could have just sent a drone out and it could have located those people that were in the water very quickly and gotten search and rescue teams out there to them even faster. I think that would have been fantastic. And we have teams within Verizon who are working on things like that. So we're constantly innovating and we're constantly pushing forward the technological envelope to see how can we do it better.
What are the advantages of using UAVs for damage assessments compared to the current procedures?
One of the things that I like to say a lot is, what are UAS and drones best used for? Anything that's dull, dirty, and dangerous, right? So after a crisis, it is so much easier to put a UAS up in the air and find out where trees are down, where power lines are down. It gives you that situation awareness. It gives you that knowledge without having to send a team, through a flooded zone to see what's going on. We've used tethered UAS to create networks after Hurricane Ian. For example, we used tethered aircraft to project connectivity onto an island where a bridge had collapsed and the island was stranded. So while we were working on getting crews over there via boats and other ways, we had that tethered aircraft up projecting connectivity onto that island so people could call their loved ones, so people could let their families know that they were safe and have that conversation, because that is extremely important to be able to do that after a weather event like a hurricane. If everything you have has been destroyed, just being able to call your family and let them know you're okay and that you love them and that, everything's going to be okay because it's just things, but everybody's all right. That's why the crisis response team does what it does, so that we can bring that level of connectivity to public safety and first responders, and in some cases, the community, so that they can make those contacts and let their family know they're safe.
From my experience working in local government, knowing which roads are usable and communicating that to the community can be a huge benefit following a major event.
When you send a first responder team out, whether it's, fire, EMS, whoever, if it takes them 20 minutes to get to a certain road, and then, there's trees blocking that road, well, now they got to backtrack and find another route, right? So how much time have you lost? That's where some of this could potentially come into play. And, no technology like the radio calls and some of those things, no technology will ever beat that in the moment, but at least helping mitigate some of that. If we can do that and save lives in the process, then it's a win at the end of the day.
What challenges do you anticipate encountering in this project?
Every crisis is different, right? Every hurricane is different. Every tornado is different. We could be flying anywhere from on top of mountains to swamps to urban areas to, rural areas where the devastation is just vast. So just understanding operationally what we might be facing when we go into an area, so that we're maintaining our standards of operating under 107, our FAA Part 107, and everything that we're tied to from a regulatory standpoint. We always want to make sure that our first priority is safety of our team, right? And safety of our pilots, and making sure that if the weather is still severe, that, we just can't fly. You're not going to put an aircraft in the air when there's 30-mile-an-hour winds necessarily. You're not going to put an aircraft up to get mapping data when there's torrential downpours, because the imagery's, well, A, the aircraft probably isn't going to be able to sustain that, but B, it's just not feasible. You're not going to be able to see anything. So just understanding operationally what we're getting into every time we go out there, and operating by our standard operating procedures and adhering to those, we will overcome any obstacles that we encounter out in the field. I have no doubt of that.
Pivoting a bit, can you tell us about your background and how it plays into this particular project?
I've got a deep background in aviation. I spent 10 years as a tactical air traffic controller in the Army. I've deployed to both Iraq and Afghanistan, and I've managed airspace tactically, within the continental United States. After I got out of the Army, I got degrees in unmanned systems and robotics, as well as GIS and cartography, and that base of understanding. And while I was getting those degrees, I also worked doing R&D for some government contractors. I've done beyond visual line of sight flights for energy companies, LiDAR, photogrammetry, you name it, I've probably done it. I've built UAS. I don't do that anymore, fortunately. We have companies that we rely on now for that. And I've developed safety programs for multiple companies. I've developed the crisis response UAS team for Verizon, but I also helped develop the SMS that Verizon uses overall. I feel like I have a wealth of knowledge, and I'm operationally focused, and mapping is kind of my forte, I guess you could say.
Building on that, what does this project mean to you personally and professionally?
My main goal is to just beat that 24-hour time hack that currently exists for agencies to get satellite data. So if we can put high quality imagery into their hands faster than 24 hours, then that's a win to me. I think that the state of UAS operations is poised to change, especially as technology grows and aircraft start getting put on LTE networks and everything just continues moving forward. I only see positive things happening, but it only happens when we push that envelope, right? So constantly pushing that envelope is vastly important.
And for my final question, Chris, what message would you like to leave regarding the future of the drone industry?
I think that it's vastly important for the drone industry to continue pushing forward. Rapid mapping is going to revolutionize the landscape, I think. When you can put an aircraft in the air using our 5G network and get imagery over an aircraft, over that LTE network, back to a photogrammetry software that can process that imagery as it's coming in. So rather than having to wait 12 to 14 hours potentially for a map to be completed, it's done when the aircraft lands, I think is huge. And as we keep pushing that technology forward, the FAA is going to continue working to integrate UAS into the national airspace. Whatever form that takes on, whatever that ends up looking like, it's just going to increase safety, and it's just going to increase the operational capabilities of all the agencies and private companies out there trying to fly aircraft. So I like to say it can only go up from here, right? It can only get better.
That's it for episode 423 of the Drone Radio Show. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Chris Sanders of Verizon Frontline. That's it for episode 423 of the Drone Radio Show. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Chris Sanders of Verizon Frontline Crisis Response Team. I want to thank Chris for taking the time to speak with me. If you want to learn more about Verizon Frontline Crisis Response Team or want to connect with Chris, check out the webpage at verizon.com/response team. If you like the Drone Radio Show, then please subscribe and share. Write a glowing review on iTunes. And if you're able, donate to keep the podcast going. Go to droneradioshow.com/donate. And thanks for listening. Your support means a lot to me, and I hope you'll listen to more episodes of the Drone Radio Show podcast to hear how others are using drones for business, fun, and research. For the Drone Radio Show, I'm Randy Gores.
This has been the Drone Radio Show podcast. More information on today's show can be found on our website at www.droneradioshow.com. If you're using drone technology for business, fun, or research and would like to share your experience on the show, please visit our website and fill out a guest appearance application. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media channels.